Big-time heavyweight battle here. Paul Bissonnette, he lands a couple of rights.
Bissonnette answers with a couple of rights.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of Down to Earth.
Inaugural?
Yeah, first one, buddy. You get it in. I had to get the biggest name. So the reason why I wanted you here, obviously, is to talk about a bunch of different things, but I write introductions. That's one of the things that I wanted to do. So let me read yours out, okay?
All right.
Everyone knows who this is, Paul Bissonnette. An interview that a guy that needs no introduction. 12-year professional hockey career, Calder Cup champion, fought Dion Phaneuf in a top prospects game, the first Canadian hockey player to surpass 1 million followers on then Twitter, co-host of the Spit and Chicklets podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Bissonnette, welcome to Down to Earth.
Hey, what an honor that I'm going to be the first guy on it.
You're the first guy on it. Of those, okay, what are you the most proud of?
Probably the fight with Dion Phaneuf at the top prospects game.
You gotta walk me through that.
So, as you guys know, Dion Phaneuf, especially when he started out, he would throw bone-crunching hits. He played for the Red Deer Rebels at the time. It was at Brent Sutter.
Yep.
That was the school of Brent Sutter, hard-nosed defenseman. And Marc-Antoine Pouliot, after a power play, was coming up the wall, head down. Dion Phaneuf came out of nowhere and delivered one of the biggest hits I'd ever seen. I was on the ice, and I was almost in shock because, remember, we're in like an all-star / top prospects game, but every scout around the league is in the building and he's trying to show his stuff. So I understand why he threw the hit, but Pouliot's out concussed, he's out of it. And that's just kind of what I did. I stuck up for teammates. Was I like a big scrapper at that time? No, I was probably getting about 4 or 5 dust-ups a year, but my light went off and I said, I got to go after this guy and challenge him. And then we duked it out and we had a good laugh about it afterward. And we'd actually played that summer was under 18. We went over to Pieszczany, Slovakia, and we were fortunate enough to win a gold medal together, and we had a great friendship. So it was kind of ironic that we ended up fighting at the top prospects, and I had to do it. I had to stick up for my teammate, and obviously he went on to be a first rounder and had a crazy first year in Calgary and an incredible career. So that I think also at the time maybe put me a little bit on the map too, to where, I ended up going 4th round of the Penguins, but I think I was projected to go 2nd round. So all in all, that's probably the one on the list that you just said that I'm most proud of.
It's funny because we're going to go through a million stories with you about a million different things. It's kind of the way I want to do this a little bit, but we're here at Dovetail Restaurant, obviously in Vancouver, a place that is now near and dear to your heart.
I'm paying their rent at this point.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm here every weekend.
What?
I don't know if you've seen the wait staff around here, but absolutely. I recommend it.
They love them. What's summer like? Like, what's the off season like for you here in Vancouver, and why Vancouver?
So I actually I was on an all-inclusive trip to Puerto Vallarta when I was 20 years old. It was after my first year pro. And I met a girl on the trip, and she was from Vancouver, and I'd never been. So we started dating, and that was the first time I'd ever came. I came later that summer, and I was blown away by the beauty of it, and just getting to run around the seawall, the people as well. And we ended up breaking it off. We're still very close friends. And years down the road, I ended up meeting a good buddy I became best friends with, and he was from the area, and he talked me and Boyd Gordon to come in when I think it was our 2nd year with the Coyotes. So I was probably about 24, 25. And he talked us into coming that summer. We rented a place downtown at the Jameson House. And every single summer since I've came, and I just have, got to meet a lot of amazing people. I love the scenery, hiking, the outdoors, and just seems to be a place that I've gravitated towards. And I'll always keep Canadian roots, even though I'm working in the United States. So this is just a part of the world and part of Canada that I want to settle down in.
Do you any time away? Like, do you not try and look at hockey news? Did you get that downtime when you're away from it? Like, you're at the Cup final, you're at the draft.
Yeah.
So do you actually get away from it? Or are you one of those guys that you're still scrolling on the internet? You're updating your phone. And people are obviously texting you about stuff.
Yeah, so I tend to delete the apps like Instagram and Twitter throughout the summer. I obviously hop back on to whether promote a podcast that we just dropped, but it's hard to completely dial out. But it gets down to a rhythm that's a lot more normal. And obviously once the season gets going, it's very hectic, like managing Spit and Chicklets, doing TNT, the travel. I've been fortunate enough, and I know you have Kevin Bieksa coming on the show as well, who's become a very good friend. I've been fortunate enough to do some Hockey Night in Canada as well. So it's fun. I love staying busy. So luckily for me, summer is a time where I can dial it out to a normal cadence, and it's been a great year. Good recharge this summer, and looking forward to hitting the ground running.
No, absolutely, and I think that's kind of where we're going to start with this. I mean, the hockey season is so close to us, but as the time that we're recording this, still news very fresh of obviously the just tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother. And initially, I mean, it shocked, I think, even if you weren't a fan of hockey, just as a human, everyone around. And you saw the beautiful tributes in Columbus and obviously in Calgary and around the NHL, just outpouring of support for both, as it should be. But just, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, just your initial reaction kind of when you heard the news.
I got a text on Thursday, and that was the day that Johnny had passed, and it was from Whit, and he said he'd heard rumblings, and probably one of the most tragic things I've ever heard and ever kind of, I don't want to say been a part of, but I feel like the whole hockey community feels like that they're a part of this right now, and just brutal to just read all the messages and the outpouring of love and support for the family, and just how well liked he was. No ego, a superstar that you wouldn't even known it, and just all the form, like the Monahan. He went on a recent podcast right before that, and just hearing him say he was so stoked to get to play in Columbus again with his best friend that he obviously played with in Calgary, and since they have kids now, and the fact that the kids are going to be able to grow up together. So it's a tragedy that just shocked the hockey community, and just my condolences to the family because of the whole situation, like the sister's wedding on the weekend and being there for it. It's just, all of it is just a tragedy.
There's also a tragedy, I mean, around the hockey world you mentioned, but for the Columbus Blue Jackets as an organization over the last few years, just what they've been through and what those guys must be going through that are in that room and just kind of breathing this every single day. Yeah, and it's just like it said, any player that has played with Johnny Gaudreau, even if it was just spending time in a training camp, actually Whit, even going to Matthew, his brother, Whit told a story on the podcast. I believe he was playing with the Omaha Lancers in the USHL, and this kid who went to camp, who knew he wasn't going to make the team, just the way that Matthew embraced him and made him feel a part of the team in a short period of time there. And it's the same goes with Johnny. Like he wasn't even aware that he was a superstar. He was just this down-to-earth kid who people had probably counted out his entire life based on his size, who had not only proven them wrong, but done it with such grace. So it's like we could go on and on here about the legacy that Johnny Gaudreau has left behind, but it's just so tragic. And 31 years old with his whole life ahead of him, with that new contract you talked about with Columbus, and things we're looking up there, but it's brutal. That kind of brings me to my next point. Kind of what I want to do in this show is talk about the mental health aspect of it, and of players and of people, and of obviously people going through their craft, and no matter what they do. So when you look at the NHL, obviously the Columbus Blue Jackets have said that they've hired mental health specialists and where anyone that needs support. But overall, not just this, as you look at the league, Biz, and things like that, how much have you seen it grow, and is there enough growth yet when it comes to mental health and taking care of people that need the help? Yeah, I mean, I think you also you see more. Well, first of all, incredible job at Columbus, like 100%. Getting out of it, because they have teammates that are probably dealing with all this right now, and even going back to last season with Patrick Laine, and the fact that he was
dealing with some personal struggles and was able to communicate that to the team and then take some time off. And you are seeing more guys throughout the season in the league doing that when things become too much. So the approach the league has taken as this conversation of mental health grows, and everybody's, especially men, are a little bit more open to talk about it and feel vulnerable. I think it's huge. And I mean, we all deal with our struggles. And from my standpoint, it's obviously not only whether you need to talk to a professional, but also like partly taking accountability in a sense of not just masking it with whether it's booze, drugs, or things that won't impact you in a positive way, but just taking that accountability, taking that time off, and putting your energy towards positive things that can bring you back into a better mind space. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and it's very important. As you said, we've all dealt with our things, right?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, when they watch you and they hear you speak and they see you on TV, they gravitate towards you. I mean, look, you are who you are. You're a big personality. You've known things like that. Everyone has a bad day or a week, right? Everyone has that, especially when it comes to mental health and things like that. How does Paul Bissonnette, if you're having a bad day or week, able to go on TNT and have those broadcasts, go on the Spit and Chicklets podcast and be able to be, as you are and as talented and as what people see that you are?
Yeah, like almost put on the mask, you're saying, when things aren't going well. I definitely think that, first of all, like hockey and playing at a professional level, even going back to junior, which I would consider professional, you're playing 68 games. It's like, hey, man, the dance goes on. When you're not feeling up to your best, like you have to go out there and you have to perform. And I just think that is maybe a level of mental toughness that I've gradually built. Not saying that it doesn't affect me or it doesn't make that day a lot harder, just trying to plow through it. But I think that just gaining that over time and having that mental strength has helped me. And I also credit former coaches and teammates with helping me overcome those things and kind of using those as building blocks to get to now. I think perspective helps too, where, I mean, like, it's, maybe I'm having a little bit of a bad day. It's like, I still get to go be on television and sit next to Wayne Gretzky and just talk about something that I know, like hockey. And, there's a lot of people who have to get up at 6 a.m. and go do construction jobs in order to feed their family. So I really feel that perspective ends up helping you get back into a better mind space, especially during like performance days where if I'm dealing with my shit, that you can overcome. It's like my problems are on a grand scale not as big as a lot of people's problems, and I think that once again, perspective and bringing yourself down to earth helps.
I think 100%. That's definitely right. I think perspective. We all of us can take a lesson in that. For sure. You think guys are comfortable saying I'm not okay? We've seen it in the last few years where guys have taken leaves. And things like. You think guys are getting there, or are we just still barely scratching the surface of that in the league?
I think that some people would maybe be a little bit hesitant to, and listen, like some guys are just way better at handling it than others, and it goes back to what I said. I also come from a little bit more of a throwback era, or at least when I was coming up through junior, like the way that certain coaches would communicate with you. And I'm not saying that's wrong either, because I actually credit that to help build up a lot of like that immunity to those types of things. But I definitely think that guys are definitely a lot more open, and especially seeing other guys who before them who have kind of paved the way in that regard. I mean, you look at guys like even a local guy like Corey Hirsch. He's a guy who's been very vulnerable and opened up about his personal struggles and what other guys are dealing with. And I definitely think it's in a great place. There's still a lot of room for improvement, but teams in the league in general are taking the initiative to get ahead of it.
I think that's the most important thing. And I think that we're going to see it grow, obviously, over the years.
Like, here's one for you. Like, they didn't even have goalie coaches back in the day. Think about the most mentally enduring position that a hockey team could have. So now every team obviously has a goalie coach now for even, like, I remember working with Sean Burke when he was in Arizona, and he had Brizgalov, he had Mike Smith, he had Devin Dubnyk, all goalies who were very talented, who maybe hit like a mental block in their career. And half of the communication between Sean Burke and those goaltenders probably wasn't even about hockey or about technique. It was about getting them in that right mind frame. And he was one of the best that I'd ever seen work with guys. And you saw with the way that those guys' careers had the trajectory from the minute that he got his hands on them to the minute that he was finished with them. And that just kind of goes to show about the growth in the league and where we're at. Maybe it's taken more time than people would like, but it's definitely been addressed.
It's kind of interesting you bring that up, and Sean Burke and goalie coaches, because I was going to ask you, my next point was sports psychologists and how much they've been involved now, not only in NHL, but also Major League Baseball, NFL, and everywhere. Yeah. My question to you, I guess, is when you were playing and you were coming up, and you said you obviously played in a throwback era, who was someone that was kind of maybe not obviously a professional, but someone that you went and talked to? Was it a parent? Was it a friend? Was it someone like that kind of helped you get through stuff?
I have a great relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
So anytime it would get that bad, she would always be a good soundboard and someone to talk to. And then I had a guy, Dennis Bombi, and he was also a fighter. So when I was getting to the AHL ranks, I mentioned earlier with Dion Phaneuf, naturally I'm not a violent guy. Obviously it had to become my role at a certain level for me to stay relevant and get a job so I could put food on the table. But Dennis had done it for so many years prior, and getting into that role was hard. It was meant your pregame nap went from you worrying about what the breakouts were to oh my God, I got to fight this guy who's been shoving needles up his ass and he's jacked beyond belief, and he's gonna pump my eyes shut tonight. Yeah. And we're in Binghamton, New York, and I'm going to get my lunch fed to me. Yeah. So he was a guy that I was able to lean on, who'd also played that role where he was vital in the growth of my career, even especially from that mental standpoint.
Fast forward, Biz.
Just one more thing, since we're on the subject. One of the most fascinating and eye-opening interviews we did was when we were in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We were going there, and we'd lined up Crosby for an interview. So it was going to be a pillar moment for us with the Spit and Chicklets crew. And because obviously Sid was doing it, Nate agreed to do it too. And Sid, we talked about his Stanley Cups and everything. And one of the main things what we talked about with Nate when he got on, which I was surprised was after I think it was his second year, he'd really been struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
And he'd reached kind of a plateau, and he started working with a sports psychologist, and it ended up taking him to the next level. So just hearing that from a current superstar saying that he'd reached almost a mental roadblock to work with a sports psychologist, and then for his game to get to the level it is now, that just tells you how important and pivotal it can be.
I feel like you and I both know that there's a lot of teams and a lot of players that not only use sports psychologists that their teams have, but also private ones themselves, just to get through days and things like that. But
or life coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not your friend. It's not a family. It's just someone else that you have to talk to.
Yeah, Clayton Keller, Coach Dar is a girl actually locally in Arizona who he's worked with hand in hand, and other players that I know, and she's great. So the list is endless as to what guys can use to sharpen their mental tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of get to you and your career a little bit, because it's been fun to watch. I remember when I started in my career, it was kind of near the end of your playing days. I interviewed you a bunch. I also see Dan Murphy as well. I know you have a good relationship with him as well. You're an entertainer. What does that mean to you now? As it did when you were playing, what does that mean to you now? People call you an entertainer. What does that mean to you?
I just try to bring, it was kind of like my fourth line role. I'm just trying to bring energy and passion to what I do. Fortunately for me, it was something that I've done my whole life. So, I didn't go to college, shocker. Davenport University for 2 credits. But, I get to talk about something I've done my whole life. So it's, I guess, a little bit easier to lean on that and then just focus on the energy and entertainment aspect. But as far as what it means to me, I'm very grateful to be in the position that I'm in, and I think that's why I bring that energy. Is just because I didn't expect to be where I am today. I never thought in a million years I'd be sitting next to Wayne Gretzky on a panel, right? I was a 4th line plug in the National Hockey League who was barely surviving. So it's been a whirlwind, and I think the word that comes to mind is just grateful.
Do you sit back ever and kind of look at that a little? Have you ever taken a moment to be like, you mentioned you were going to fight someone in Binghamton, New York, and you knew you were going to get your lunch fed to you, and you also said, now I'm sitting beside the great one.
Yeah.
Being able to talk about something that you love. You ever been able to stop and sit there, or are you just kind of going through it and just doing it day by day?
So I have a very hard time doing that.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately you go through life experiences and it kind of it throws you in a certain trajectory. My final year in Arizona after that, I couldn't get a job. I couldn't even get a job in the American Hockey League. I went to a PTO with St. Louis, and it was great. I had a blast. It's actually where me and Whit thought of the concept of spitting chiclets. Yeah. And originally the idea was sitting in a locker room with your gear. You would never actually put on your gear. You just open up your bag and have some pops and tell old school stories.
Yeah.
And I got released from the PTO. They didn't have any more contracts, but I went back home and I didn't have a job. I was on the couch for a month. And all of a sudden my livelihood had been stripped from me. And it was a very vulnerable feeling having somebody else and other teams and individuals in control of that. So that kind of just woke me up to saying that, when it's all said and done, you have to control your own destiny and you have to, get working because nobody's going to save you. So when I retired, I hit the ground running. I did that Biz Does BC thing. And I guess to get back to the point is I've never felt, I wouldn't have felt comfortable ever just taking a step back and being like, oh, this is awesome. So it's kind of programmed me to always be looking forward. What's the next thing? What's the next challenge? Instead of sitting there and kind of patting myself on the back. It's kind of just that experience and not having a contract and being vulnerable and sitting on the couch after having that stripped for me has led to me to not ever take it for granted. And never being like, oh yeah, this is, look at what we've done. No, what's next? Great job that we had success doing that. How can we make it better? And what's next?
Who are your mentors when you were starting in kind of the broadcasting game? Who do you lean on? You mentioned Kevin BX's name, obviously. You have a relationship with him. Who else very early on? I remember you were doing color in Arizona and radio, and then kind of worked your way up, and now obviously where you are with TNT. Who have you kind of looked up to or talked to?
So my first job out of playing, so obviously I was fortunate enough, and I told this story about being on the couch. That was the year I won the Calder Cup. Yep. It went from being on the couch, depressed, and you talk about the league and the way they handle things. I called the league doctors, and even though I was not a member of the league anymore, they helped me and got me, didn't resort to drugs, did natural remedies, natural path in order to get back on track. Won the Calder Cup that year, played 2 more years pro, tore both my ACLs in my last year, and I knew it was time to hang it up. And fortunately for me, Rich Nair, our old PR guy in Arizona, reached out and said, hey, we got an opening as far as a color guy for the radio. And I got to slide right in with a guy named Bob Heathouse, who did play-by-play for the Coyotes for years and years. And he had helped Tyson Nash when he retired. He had Louis DeBrusque. He's still working with new people all the time. Lindsey Fry was the latest one to step in there, who won a bronze medal, I think, with the U.S. Olympic team. And he was the first guy I got to work with. So I really got to sharpen my skills in the broadcasting department with Bob Heathouse. And I had a blast working with them and him and getting to learn the ropes off of not only him, but also Tyson Nash, who'd learned from him, and then that was doing color for the television side. So I would say those are 2 guys early on that I really got to lean on. Who, I mean, Bob is obviously, he nurtured a lot of people, so his experience in it, but also Tyson Nash, who was a cusp NHL player who had a similar role to me, who had transitioned from that into media. So you look at how it all worked out and how grateful I am to have been picked up by waivers by the Coyotes and then to end up back there. Though that was to end up with those 2 mentors early on was a huge benefit for my career in the post career. And
then kind of fast forward to TV. Anyone that you talk to on a daily or things like that, or how did you find your niche? I know you mentioned you talked about the entertainer thing, but how have you find it's so hard for people to find who they are on television? How have you been able to do it so seamlessly?
So we were fortunate where TNT allowed us to be ourselves, but it goes to who I got to work with. I mean, Wayne is always a great mentor and just great to listen to his stories. But Rick Tocchet, so he was the guy in the far seat. And also, you could look at Liam McHugh and Anson Carter. Those guys have been doing it, and they're seasoned vets. and they helped us ease into it too. So I would consider them mentors as well. More so because I was in the hotel with Talk all the time, and we'd be taking like steamers and working out together, going for walks. And once again, like he played that tough physical role a lot better on the skill department than I was, that's for sure. But he was kind of a guy that I got to bounce a lot off of early on, and that I'm extremely grateful that I got to spend time with. Rick Tocchet is a fascinating guy. Not only from his playing career, but the way he's been able to evolve like in his post-career, whether it was television, whether being an assistant coach and kind of being that, when you're an assistant, you're a little bit more buddy-buddy with the players. We're now head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, and the way he's been able to turn around this organization. A guy who relentlessly works, and that we go back to the having that mindset where there were tough days where maybe we were stuck in a hotel for 6 weeks during playoff coverage where we weren't getting a day off. He would be a guy who would bring you back in that mindset where you would need to be.
How do you marriage the two of the old school media and the old school way of thinking of the game, but the way that the younger generation looks at the game? How do you kind of do that and go about that?
I think that, like, as much as we think things have changed, that they've stayed the same.
Yeah, I mean, agree.
I think that people would maybe say that the game overall has become a little bit softer, and but yeah, I think that I do enjoy the fighting and the physical element of the game. So I would say that you just have to make sure you've teetered the line just based off of information that we've figured out probably over the last 10 years. The concussion and not wanting to guys to put up with or deal with the things that we've talked about prior in the interview. So it's a challenge, but you do it. You just kind of read the room, I guess.
You ever been starstruck?
Starstruck.
Either in your playing days or your broadcasting days?
Okay, so now working with TNT, we stay at the Four Seasons in Atlanta.
Must be nice.
Blowing our cover. Not a bad deal. And oftentimes there's just a lot of famous people staying there where, like J. Cole, the elevator opened one time, J. Cole was right there.
Okay.
And I'm a big J. Cole guy. So I was like, hey, starstruck, maybe that's not the word, but like, wow, like I want to shake this person's hand and tell them they're amazing. Spike Lee in an elevator at the Four Seasons. Probably the craziest one and one of my favorite actors of all time is Denzel Washington. Yep. And I was going to I was going down to the lobby for a walk, and there must have been the meal room for the Miami Heat. So I come off the elevator, and you got Jimmy Butler and all the famous Miami Heat players are, like, as soon as I get off, I see them. And then who's holding court for them? Denzel Washington. And the way that he was speaking, and it was almost like he was a preacher. Yeah. And I just stood there for like 4 or 5 minutes, and I just like listened to him. I didn't shake his hand. I didn't ask to intrude because they were all kind of surrounding him and they had their little thing. But as he was talking, you could tell more and more strangers were just more marveling and not taking the elevators, being like, Denzel Washington's holding court right now with Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. And that was probably one moment where I would have liked to have said hello, but I just didn't and absorbed what was happening. And probably a good thing. That was good self-awareness. Good job, Biz.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the ice, is there when you're playing on the ice, you look across, the other guy lined up, anyone that you're like, oh my God, I'm playing against?
Yeah, I would say that I think it was my second year with the Coyotes, maybe first or second year, and I'd started Twitter. And Nicholas Lindstrom was sitting at center ice stretching. He was just, stretching his groins. And he was just like, hey, man, big fan of the Twitter page. And, like, I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, Nick Lindstrom's like, he must have been. I think the reason why he said that was because the night prior, it was Oliver Ekman-Larsson's first time playing against him.
Okay.
And they were in Detroit, and obviously both being Swedish. So I reached out to Oliver because at the time he was just a call-up, and I don't think he had my number. And I was like, "Hey, Oliver, it's Nick, and maybe we could grab dinner." Kind of played that trick on him. Yeah. I think that he's like, and he searched around and figured out it was me. Yeah. But maybe I think I ended up tweeting out the story or said something about it online, and maybe that's why you got a kick out of it. But I thought that was pretty cool, and really it was just getting. Like, I was fortunate to even play in the NHL, so to get to line up, and when I say line up, I mean warm up against The Joe Thorntons, I mean, before I even got to Phoenix, like I got to play with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Marc-Andre Fleury, Chris Letang. So to be able to tell my kids that I got to go see Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin bring their work ethic in in which that they did every day to the rink, that's pretty cool. That's like a pinch yourself moment every time I think about it, where if I eventually have kids, it's like, yeah, that's going to be a cool card to play.
No, absolutely. What was...
But don't tell Sid or Evgeny I was starstruck by them.
No,
because then they're going to be all weird around me now.
Did you ever imagine when you got on Twitter the first time you sent your tweet that it would have gotten to the heights that it did?
No.
Just Twitter alone?
No, so I'll give you the backstory to that. I was anti-Twitter because I remember watching, I don't know if it was ESPN at the time or they had a Charles Barkley, his face in a quote, and he was just like shredding Twitter. And the way that he was describing it in the quote, it seemed like it was just an app where you would just be like, hey guys, heading to the mall. like
updating your Facebook status.
Yeah, where I was like, what the fuck, that's bullshit. Like, that's kind of lame.
Yeah.
And then Scotty Upshaw, who was already on it, who was my teammate, he was based on my personality and all these silly interviews I would do. He goes, man, you got to start a Twitter and like just tweet out this nonsense that you're doing or whatever you're getting involved in all the time. And I was like, nah. And then sure enough, after training in that following summer, I was, you're sitting around, you're trying to get your rest and you're watching TV. So you're a little bit bored, right? You can't be going out golfing every day. You're going to burn all your energy out.
Yeah.
I decided, you know what? Let's fire up a Twitter.
Yeah.
And I did it then, and it kind of took on a mind of its own. I'll never forget. I sent out the Kovalchuk tweet. That was later that summer after the popularity had grown.
Yes,
and I got a call from my agent, Mark Guy, and he goes, Biz, I don't know what you're doing on this tweeter machine, but nothing good can come of this.
So how did you deal with that after?
I shut it down.
Yeah.
I shut the Twitter down.
Yeah.
And then Rich Nairn at the time, he called me a few days after I'd shut it down. And he goes, hey man, are you telling people that the Coyotes forced you to shut down your Twitter? I was like, no, Rich. I go, my agent called me, said that I better get off, or if I keep tweeting some of the nonsense I'm tweeting that the Coyotes could rip up my contract.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's true. That's true. But we never said that. And we have some season ticket holders who are messaging us basically saying like, hey, like why are you censoring him? Like, let him show his personality. Like, we need this. We like this. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, you guys seem down with it. He goes, listen, let's wait. But when you get back to training camp, let's fire up your Twitter again and I'll help monitor it.
Okay.
And I thought of the name BizNasty 2.0 because I think at the time these like internet or whatever systems were like, oh, the 2.0, the 3.0 version. So that's when BizNasty 2.0 came about. And no, I never thought it would gain the attention that it did. And it took off. And obviously probably the reason that I've ended up on the media side doing everything that I've done.
This is going to be a great transition because we're going to go into Twitter and there's so much great that can come of it and so much things.
Oh, here we go.
But there's also a lot of bad. And, we've all had bad tweets, but one of the segments I wanted to bring into this is after having a conversation, kind of go lighthearted a little bit and mean tweets.
Well, for you.
Mean tweets. So I think you can take it. I think you give it enough on TV where you can take it. So
my skin's thick enough.
I'm gonna get you to read these tweets. And
Did you dig these up from the past?
Some of them are the past, some of them are kind of recent, but these ones are pretty good. So we'll start with that one. If you can just read it, a little reaction to it.
It's actually impressive just how consistently awful Bissonnette is and his takes are. Like, you'd think eventually something not insanely stupid would come out of his yap. But nope, just one L after another. Hey, you guys can follow us, guys, if you want to share in the hate. That's Steve Lynch at KYNCHMO. Incredible. Now, that's a Bruins fan. I've been very hard on the Bruins. And I also said that they would miss playoffs. And then they went on to win the President's Trophy 2 years ago. Yeah. So I agree with them.
I got another one for you. I got three, and then...
This one is just... I'm glad you came in with that one.
Okay.
Am I the only one who can't stand this guy? He is such a bore. Welland trash will always be Welland trash.
I thought that one might dig deep for you a little bit.
Welland is a very trashy place, the Rose City, but I love that about it. It is gritty. We got the baseball team in town, the Jackfish, the one-eyed Jackfish.
Okay,
That's Brian Kane, at Brian Kane 9. So you guys can follow him too.
I went from Twitter to a different message board.
By the way, there was an emoji in that one too.
Yeah, I think it was the roll eyes.
It's the rolling his eyes to the back of his skull.
Yeah, so there's fun. It's not
another
Twitter,
Bruins fan.
Another Bruins one.
Guy's a piece of shit windbag who knows about as much about hockey as my cat. I love this. This is Nate Newton, 1978. So Nate, I mean, thank you for the laugh. Could we tag these guys in these clips so they get the love that they deserve?
Absolutely. No, 100%. I think there's so much.
Hate.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's one final one here. I think you and I both know this guy a little bit.
A
late ad. So I'm going to play this for you.
Oh, Mikey Grinelli.
Yeah, and let's see what he says here.
Busy boy, true or false? You got in a bar fight. You mangled your hand. You went home, you poured Captain Morgan on it, thinking it will clean it up a little bit. It got infected, you had to go to the hospital, and you missed some time. True or false?
That's true. So in my early days, I was a young idiot.
Yeah.
Young, dumb, and full of cum, I believe they say the term is. So I'm outside of a bar grabbing like a hot dog.
Yeah.
Easier. Easy with the motion biz. So I'm hanging out, just chilling, and this guy comes yapping around the corner, talking nonsense, and then finally I was just like, "Will you shut up?" Drunk, and he challenges me. So we stand up, and then boom, I snag him right in the teeth.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that a human's mouth is dirtier than a dog's mouth as far as the bacteria. So you could see the cut right there.
Oh yeah, we'll get a close up on that. I'm sure.
So I drop him. I get put in cuffs. He finally comes to. And they're like, all right, you can go. He's like, he's good to go. He said he just wants to go home. No charges being pressed, thank God. So I go home. Obviously, I'm bleeding and it's gushing. And I thought that, you clean your wounds off with alcohol. So the only alcohol I had in the house was a bottle of Captain Morgan's. So I'm over the sink and I'm cleaning it off.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I could feel the sting. Oh, yeah,
it's working.
All right, clean it up. Time to go to bed. I wake up in the morning, my hand's like this big.
Okay.
And I told my dad, I remember my dad was like, well, what happened to your hand? And I said, I closed it on the car door. I didn't want to tell my dad I got in a bar scrap. I was a little bit embarrassed. Well, fast forward about 4 or 5 more hours. This thing is throbbing. Something's obviously up. Go to the hospital. You're waiting in the hospital in Ontario. I think I was 4 or 5 hours in the hallway. Finally got called in. The doctor's like, oh my God, he's like, you should have told him that this was a little bit more of an emergency. That's infected. We have to send you to St. Catharines, and that has to be surgically opened and cleaned up so the infection doesn't continue to spread. Well, 7 days later, I leave the hospital, and I had a Pittsburgh Penguins rookie camp about a week later. So I dropped 10, 15 pounds. I had no muscle on my body because I just spent the whole time in the hospital. And that was my learning lesson, that you don't just clean off any wound with Captain Morgan's spiced rum.
It's a lesson that we should all take very seriously.
Yeah.
Biz, can't believe we've sat through this entire interview. NHL and TNT has the Stanley Cup Finals. The only hockey question I'm actually going to ask you on this is, you guys have the Cup Final this season. What is your Cup Final prediction? What do you hope for? What do you think is going to happen?
The same one as last year. The Edmonton Oilers, that's an obvious answer coming out of the West, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And if we could get Wayne Gretzky on the panel with Edmonton back in the finals with Connor McDavid's chance to win a Stanley Cup, which he won't because the Leafs are going to win it, it would be just incredible to see the heartbreak.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, the inaugural episode of Down.
Go Leafs, go! Go Leafs, go!
Thank you to my very good friend, Paul Bissonnette.
Hey.
I really appreciate it. Thank you to Dovetail for letting us sit here for a little bit.
Down to earth. Check it out. An honor being the first guest. Suck on that, BXA.